The stars were quiet the night the Valorian ship fell out of warp. Captain Diana Reeves stood at the command bridge of the U.S. Ironclad, the largest warship in humanity's 7th Deep Fleet, and watched the sensors light up like a Christmas tree. She was a tall woman, broad-shouldered, with short brown hair cut military clean and gray eyes that had seen 3 wars and 2 genocides. She did not scare easily. She had not scared in years. But tonight something made the back of her neck prickle. "Commander Walsh," she said without turning her head. "What am I looking at?" Lieutenant Commander Patrick Walsh stepped up beside her. He was younger than her by a decade, freckled and sharp-eyed, with the kind of nervous energy that made him excellent under pressure. He read the sensor display twice before he spoke, because Patrick Walsh never said anything once he wasn't sure of. "Unknown vessel, Captain. Configuration doesn't match anything in our database." He paused. "It's not human. I can see that." Diana leaned closer to the display. The ship was enormous, nearly twice the length of the Ironclad, which was itself 1.5 kilometers of reinforced titanium and particle cannons. But it was broken. It was tumbling slowly through space, venting plasma from 3 separate points along its hull, trailing debris like a wounded animal shedding scales. "Life signs." "Affirmative. Multiple." Walsh's fingers moved across the console. "Hundreds, maybe more. Hard to get a clean read through all that interference." "Is it armed?" "Weapons systems appear to be offline. Shields are down. Whatever hit them, it hit them hard." Diana straightened up. Her jaw set in that particular way that the crew of the Ironclad had come to understand meant she had already made a decision and was simply organizing the words to deliver it. "Open a channel," she said. "Captain," Walsh began. "Open it." The communications officer, Ensign Yolanda Park, 23 years old, fresh from the academy, already the best signal specialist on the ship, brought her hands to the console and opened every available frequency simultaneously. Static. Then more static. Then, cutting through it like a blade through silk, a sound came through that made every human on the bridge go very still. It was not a human voice. It was layered, harmonic, 2 or 3 tones woven together like a chord played by a living throat. It rose and fell in patterns that were clearly language, clearly structured, clearly desperate. And then, faint, broken but unmistakable, came 4 words in English. "Please. We are dying." Diana did not hesitate. Full stop. All hands to rescue stations. She turned to Walsh. "Get me a boarding team and a medical team at Docking Bay 4 in 10 minutes. Walsh looked at her. "Captain, protocol requires." "I know what protocol requires, Patrick." Her voice was quiet and very even. "And I'm telling you what I require. 10 minutes. He went. Diana looked back at the broken ship tumbling through the dark. 3 wars. 2 genocides. 31 years in the fleet. She had never once left a distress call unanswered. She was not about to start now. The boarding team assembled in Docking Bay 4 with 9 minutes and 40 seconds to spare. Diana noted this with private satisfaction. The Ironclad ran well because she insisted on it. Sergeant Major Leon Torres stood at the head of the Marine detail. 6 soldiers in full combat armor, visors down, weapons at safe. Leon was 45, built like a refrigerator that had been to war, with a shaved head and a scar running from his left ear to his chin that he had never once explained. He was the kind of man who treated every situation, breakfast, shore leave, first contact with an alien species, with the same calm, methodical attention. Diana trusted him more than almost anyone alive. "Rules of engagement," she said as she approached. "Weapons stay on safe unless fired upon," Leon said immediately. "Non-lethal deterrence first, lethal force only as a last resort and only on my direct order or yours." "Good." She looked at the medical team assembled to the right. 4 doctors and 6 medics led by Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sandra Obi. Sandra was small and precise, with close-cropped natural hair and hands that never shook. "Sandra, we have no idea what biology we're walking into. Unknown atmospheric requirements, unknown pathogens, unknown." "I've already initiated full-spectrum biohazard protocols," Sandra said calmly. "All medical personnel are in sealed suits with independent air. I've also taken the liberty of pulling every xenobiology database we have access to, which admittedly isn't much, but it's something. That's why I keep you around." Diana pulled on her own helmet. "Let's go meet our guests." The umbilical tunnel from the Ironclad to the alien vessel took 4 minutes to establish. The airlock cycled with a sound like a held breath being released. And then the door opened and Diana Reeves walked into another world. The interior of the Valorian ship was vast and dim. The architecture was organic-looking, curved walls, arching corridors that looked grown rather than built, surfaces that shimmered with embedded bioluminescence in soft blues and greens, most of which were failing and flickering. The air that their sensors registered was breathable, nitrogen-oxygen mix, slightly lower oxygen content than human standard, slightly higher CO2, manageable with the rebreathers they were wearing. The smell was harder to manage. It was something between rain and copper and something else entirely, something that had no human equivalent, something old and mineral and deep. Several of the Marines shifted in their suits. No one said anything. "Contact," Leon said quietly, and Diana looked ahead. They were standing in the corridor, 3 of them, and Diana's first clear look at a Valorian stopped her mid-step. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, and bilaterally symmetrical in the broad sense, 2 legs, 2 arms, and upright posture. But the details were entirely their own. Their skin was a dark charcoal gray, smooth and slightly iridescent, like graphite in low light. Their faces were wide, with large eyes that occupied far more of the face than human eyes, deep amber in color, currently wide with what even Diana could recognize as fear. They had 4 fingers on each hand, long and articulated, and their heads were narrow at the jaw and broad at the temples, giving them a slightly top-heavy appearance. They were wearing what had clearly been uniforms. Those uniforms were torn, stained with a dark fluid that might have been blood, and the 3 Valorians wearing them were visibly shaking. The one in the center spoke. That layered, harmonic voice again, and then, haltingly in English, "You answered. We did not think anyone would answer." Diana kept her voice steady. "Come." The voice she used when things were very bad and she needed people, human or otherwise, to understand that she was in control. "We heard your signal," she said. "My name is Captain Diana Reeves of the United Earth ship Ironclad. We're here to help." She paused. "Can you tell me your name?" The Valorian looked at her for a long moment. Its amber eyes, her eyes, Diana revised because something about the posture and proportion suggested female, moved from Diana's face to the Marines behind her to the medical team and back again. "I am VEL Coordinator Saya," she said, "and I am asking for asylum." Pause. A breath that was clearly difficult. "For all of my people who are still alive." Diana looked at her for exactly 2 seconds. "How many of you are there?" 412, Saya said. "And we are being hunted." Dr. Sandra Obi had been a doctor for 20 years and a fleet medical officer for 12 of them. She had treated humans in every conceivable state of damage: blast wounds, radiation sickness, catastrophic decompression, the particular horror of what a particle cannon did to organic tissue at close range. She had thought, by this point in her career, that she had reached the outer boundary of things that could shock her. The Valorian Medical Bay adjusted that assumption rapidly. There were 260 wounded aboard the alien ship. Not lightly wounded, not scrapes and bruises and the walking hurt that every battle produced. These were grievous wounds. Burn patterns that Sandra had never seen before, caused by weapons she had no reference for. Limb damage consistent with something that gripped and crushed rather than cut or blasted. And a recurring injury in the most severely wounded, a kind of neural disruption that showed up on Sandra's scanners as a cascading failure in the bioelectric systems of the Valorian nervous system, spreading slowly outward from the site of the wound like ink in water. "What did this to them?" she asked Saya. They were in the Valorian medical area, which looked nothing like a human medical facility, being organized around what appeared to be communal recovery spaces rather than individual beds, with ambient bioluminescence dialed down low and a constant low harmonic sound playing from somewhere in the walls that Sandra was beginning to understand was intentional, some kind of comfort or pain management tool. Saya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The Kreth." The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. "Tell me about the Kreth," Sandra said. Saya looked at one of her wounded. A young Valorian, very young, Sandra thought, the amber eyes still large and unguarded in the way of the young, lying in one of the recovery spaces with that neural disruption spreading slowly through her small body. Saya reached out and touched the young one's face with extraordinary gentleness. "The Kreth," Saya said slowly, still watching the child, "are not like us. They're not like you. They do not have a home world in the way that you or I would understand it. They move. They have always moved. They find civilizations that have resources they want, and they..." She paused, chose a word carefully. "They harvest." "Harvest," Sandra repeated. "They take what they want. The materials. The technology. Another pause. The biological components." She said this last part with a flatness that told Sandra the flatness was deliberate, was something she was doing to keep herself functional. When there is nothing left to take, they destroy what remains. They have done this to 4 civilizations in this sector in the last 200 years. And now they're doing it to yours. They began 8 months ago. Saya finally looked away from the child. Her amber eyes met Sandra's through Sandra's transparent visor. "We are the Vel. We are not a warrior people. We are not built for this. We ran. She looked around at the wounded, the dead, the surviving 412 crammed into a ship meant for a crew of 200. We ran and we found your signal, humanity's exploration beacon, and we came here. Sandra thought about this. Why us? You must have passed other systems. Other civilizations. Yes. Something crossed Saya's face that Sandra was learning to read as the Valorian equivalent of a wry, dark, complicated smile. We passed the Dorothy. They are strong, a military culture, many ships. We sent a signal. They responded by telling us that if we led the Kreth into their space, they would destroy us themselves. The expression deepened. We passed the Ledhani Collective. A peaceful people, scholars, traders. They told us they had a non-aggression treaty with the Kreth and could not be seen to assist us. She paused. And then we picked up humanity's signal. And what made you think we'd be different? Saya was quiet for a long moment. Your signal, she said finally. Every civilization broadcasts a signal, a marker, an identity pulse. The Dorothy signal speaks of their military strength, their territory, their warnings to those who approach. The Lethani speaks of their treaties and their commerce. She looked at Sandra with those enormous amber eyes. Humanity's signal says, if you are lost, come here. If you are hurt, come here. If you have nowhere left to go, come here. Sandra blinked. She had not known that. She had never thought about what the exploration beacon said. It says that, she asked. Yours is the only civilization, Saya said quietly, whose signal reads like an open door. Back on the Ironclad, Diana Reeves was on a priority communication channel with Fleet Admiral James Okafor at Deep Fleet Command, and the conversation was not going well. Captain Reeves, Okafor said. His face on the screen was carefully neutral in the way that senior officers made their faces carefully neutral when they were in fact extremely concerned. You understand that you have potentially initiated first contact with two separate alien civilizations simultaneously, one of which is, by your own report, actively hunting the other. Yes, Admiral, I understand that. And you understand that you did this without authorization, without following first contact protocols, and without... Admiral. Diana kept her voice respectful and her spine straight and her eyes directly on his. There were 412 people, Sir-sapient beings, dying in a ship 40 meters from my docking bay. They asked for help. I helped them. She paused. I would do it again. Okafor looked at her for a long moment. Then something shifted very slightly in his carefully neutral face. The Kreth, he said. Tell me everything. Chief Intelligence Officer Marcus Webb had been listening to the entire conversation from a secondary station, which was exactly where Diana had told him to be. Marcus was 42, lean and angular, with the kind of mind that sorted information the way other people breathed, automatically, constantly, without apparent effort. He had spent 15 years in fleet intelligence before Diana had recruited him to the Ironclad, and he was, in Diana's professional assessment, the most dangerous person on the ship, because the most dangerous thing in any conflict was accurate information. When the communication with Okafor ended, Marcus slid a data pad across the table to her. I've been running everything Saya gave us through the database, he said. Cross-referencing with every Deep Space Survey report from the past century, every anomalous signal, every dead planet report from exploration teams. Diana picked up the pad. Read it. Her jaw tightened. 7 systems, she said. 7 systems in our sector with profiles consistent with Kreth harvesting activity, Marcus confirmed. We thought they were natural extinction events. We thought they were geological or stellar catastrophes. He tapped the pad. They weren't. How long before they follow the Vels trail here? Marcus met her eyes. Their fastest ships are approximately 30% faster than our fastest ships, according to what Saya told us. If they've already tracked the Vels warp signature, he paused. 72 hours. Maybe less. Diana set the data pad down on the table with a very controlled, very deliberate movement. She looked at Walsh, who had been standing at the far end of the room with his hands clasped behind his back and the expression of a man who had already done the math and was not happy about the answer. Patrick, she said. Yes, Captain. Give me a full battle assessment. Everything we have, everything we can realistically bring online in 72 hours. She stood. And contact the other ships in range. I want Captains Mercer, Liu and Osei on a secure channel within the hour. Walsh nodded. Moved to the door. Stopped. Diana. He used her first name, which he only did when he was about to say something she needed to hear rather than something she wanted to hear. We are talking about going to war with an alien civilization we have never encountered before. One that has destroyed 4 civilizations. One that is, by every measure we currently have, more technologically advanced than we are. Diana looked at him evenly. I know, she said. And we're doing this for 400 aliens we met 2 hours ago. Yes. Walsh held her gaze for a moment. Then something that was almost a smile crossed his face. I'll get you your battle assessment, he said. And he left. Saya had been inside human spaces for 6 hours, and she had not yet stopped being astonished. The ironclad was, there was no Valorian word for it, so she was constructing one in real time, a weapon home. A place where humans lived and worked and apparently laughed and argued and cooked food and told jokes, and which was simultaneously a machine of war of extraordinary capability. The Vel did not have a concept for this. They had civilian spaces and they had the small defensive arrays that protected those spaces, and those two things existed in entirely separate contexts. The idea of living inside your own weapon, of making a home out of armor and guns and reactor cores, was so foreign to Valorian sensibility that Saya had no frame for it. And yet it felt, she was not comfortable with this feeling, it confused her, it felt safe. She was walking with a young human named Ensign Yolanda Park, who had been assigned to her as a liaison and translator. Yolanda was 23 years old, which Saya had been told was young for a human but which seemed to Saya like a person who had been forged in some specific and purposeful way. She was compact and quick, with dark eyes that missed nothing and a manner that was simultaneously warm and extremely professional. How many crew on this ship? Saya asked. 2,200, Yolanda said. Saya processed this. Her own ship, the Remembrance of Dawn, which was what its name translated to, had a design capacity of 200 crew. And all of them live here? On the ship. Eat, sleep, train, work, everything. Yolanda gestured around the corridor they were walking through, broad, lit in warm whites and blues, lined with what appeared to be photographs. Saya had noticed the photographs on every wall of every corridor she had walked. Humans and landscapes and animals and what appeared to be celebrations. The deployment is 18 months. So yeah, this is home while we're out here. Saya stopped in front of one of the photographs. It showed a group of humans in what were clearly not uniforms, casual clothing, bright colors, gathered around some kind of fire, outdoors, laughing. What is this? Yolanda looked. A cookout. Barbecue. It's a gathering. For food and company. It's a thing we do. You do this on the ship? We do it everywhere we can. Yolanda smiled, that remarkably expressive human facial behavior that Saya was starting to read more accurately. Deck 7 has a pretty good setup. Cooking units modified to simulate outdoor cooking. Captain Reeves allows it twice a month when we're not in active operations. Saya looked at the photograph for a moment longer. Then she continued walking. Yolanda, she said. Can I ask you something directly? Of course. The Kreth are coming. Your captain knows this. She has chosen to stay, to defend us. Saya paused. What? We are strangers. We have no treaty, no alliance, no history with your people. We cannot offer compensation. Our resources are destroyed, our home world is under siege. We are, by any rational calculation, a poor investment. Yolanda was quiet for a moment. They turned a corner and the corridor opened into a wider space. A junction with people moving through it in multiple directions, all with purpose, all with the particular focused energy that Saya had noticed permeated every human space on this ship. I don't think the captain thinks about it that way, Yolanda said finally. Then how does she think about it? Yolanda considered. She thinks about, you asked for help. You're in danger. We have the capacity to help. She looked at Saya. That's kind of the whole equation for her. It is not logical. Yolanda laughed, short, warm, genuine. No, it's really not. She paused. But I've been on 3 ships in my career and the ironclad under Captain Reeves is the one I'd pick every time because when things get bad, and in this job they get bad, you want to be somewhere where the people around you operate on that equation. Saya was still thinking about this when they arrived at what Yolanda called the training deck, and Saya got her second profound shock of the day. The humans were exercising. Not the light maintenance conditioning that Vel personnel did to keep their bodies functional. These humans were, Saya watched with genuine disbelief, were hurting themselves. Were lifting weights that seemed frankly excessive, were running with full equipment, were sparring with each other with a physicality that would have been considered aggressive bordering on violent in any Vel context, were doing things with their bodies that seemed to her medical mind to be deliberately pushing into the margins of what a body could withstand. They are choosing to do this? She asked. Yolanda looked mildly amused. Yeah, some people love it. It's stress relief. It's preparation. She searched for a word. A lot of humans just genuinely enjoy seeing what their bodies can do. Saya watched a woman, early 30s, very tall, extraordinarily muscular, do something with a weighted bar that Saya's xenobiology databanks flagged as requiring more muscle fiber activation than most Valorian bodies possessed in total. Your bodies, Saya said slowly, are remarkable. I mean, no. Saya turned to look at her. I have the medical scans we ran when we came aboard for atmospheric compatibility. I have been looking at them since we arrived. She paused. Yolanda. Your homeworld. What is its gravity compared to galactic standard? Yolanda tilted her head. About 1.2 times standard, I think? I don't have the exact figure. 1.22, Saya said. And your atmospheric pressure is approximately 1.4 times what most oxygen-breathing civilizations consider comfortable. Your average body temperature is significantly higher than any of the other 6 oxygen-breathing civilizations I have medical data on. Your bone density is. She paused, apparently finding the numbers difficult to accept. Your bone density is 4 times that of Vel bone density. Your muscle fiber is denser and more elastic. Your pain response, the signal your body sends when it is being damaged, is high, but your ability to continue functioning through that signal is. She stopped. How do you do that? How do you keep going when your body is telling you to stop? Yolanda thought about it. We just decide to, she said. You decide to ignore your body's damage signals. I mean, there's a line. But yeah, basically. Saya looked back at the training deck. Looked at the humans pushing their already formidable bodies past the point of comfort voluntarily for recreation. The Vel were not a warrior people. She was beginning to understand, with a specific and complicated feeling that mixed hope and something close to awe with a deeper, more unsettling awareness of just how alone the Vel had been in the galaxy, what it meant that humanity's signal read like an open door. Sergeant Major Leon Torres found the 3 Valorian children in cargo hold B at 0200 hours, and he did not report it to anyone. They were small, much smaller than the Valorian adults, with the same charcoal gray skin and amber eyes, but with a roundedness to their faces that was universal in the young of any species. They had, from what Leon could see, crawled through a maintenance access corridor from the docking arm connecting the 2 ships and found their way here. They were huddled together behind a storage container, watching him with enormous, terrified eyes. Leon stopped 3 meters away. He sat down on the floor, cross-legged, so that his face was closer to their level. He took off his helmet. He waited. After approximately 4 minutes, the largest of the 3, probably 8 or 9 years old, he guessed, though he had no real reference, crept forward slightly. He revised because she had a particular way of holding herself, looked at him with eyes that were afraid and tired and something else underneath the fear. Curious. Leon reached into the cargo pocket of his jacket, slowly, deliberately, keeping his movements visible and unthreatening, and pulled out a protein bar. He held it out. She looked at it. He took a bite himself, chewed, nodded, held it out again. She crept forward and took it. The other 2 followed. Leon sat with 3 small alien children in cargo hold B for 2 hours, and he did not move, and he did not make sudden gestures, and he did not speak loudly. He spoke quietly, telling them, in the patient, unhurried way that he had once used with his nieces and nephews when they were small, about Earth. About mountains and oceans and how the sky looked just before a thunderstorm. He did not know if they understood the words. He suspected they understood the tone because after 40 minutes, the smallest one fell asleep against his knee. He stayed until morning. He did not report it. Some things did not need to be reported. The battle assessment that Walsh delivered to Diana at 0600 was thorough, honest, and not encouraging. The Ironclad was the largest and most heavily armed ship in the immediate sector. Its weapon systems were state-of-the-art, 24 particle cannon batteries, 12 torpedo bays carrying a mixture of kinetic and plasma warheads, point defense grids capable of handling incoming projectiles at relativistic speeds, and a new experimental system called the Apex Array that had been installed 6 months ago and which Diana had been meaning to test under controlled conditions. She was going to test it under significantly less controlled conditions than she had planned. Captain Mercer's ship, the UES Resolute, was a fast attack vessel, half the Ironclad size but with a speed advantage of 40% and weapons systems specifically designed for hit-and-run tactics. Captain Liu commanded the Shenlong, a science and exploration vessel that had been fitted with a modest defensive armament when deployed to this sector. And Captain Kwame Osei commanded the Lagos, a fleet support ship, heavily armored, slower than everything else, carrying the repair drones and medical supplies and ammunition reserves that kept a fleet operational over extended engagements. For ships. Against a civilization that had destroyed 4 others. Tell me about their weapons, Diana said, because the first thing you needed to know about a fight was not whether you could win, but what you were up against. Saya had provided everything she had. Marcus Webb had spent the night turning that raw intelligence into something tactical. Plasma-based primary weapons, he said. Higher yield than our particle cannons, roughly 3 times the energy output per shot, with a wider dispersion pattern. He moved to the next display. Secondary weapons are these, The screen showed something that looked like a net made of energy, spreading outward from a ship in the combat footage Saya had provided. We're calling them null fields. They're suppression weapons. They don't destroy directly, they interfere with electromagnetic systems. Sensors, communications, navigation, weapon targeting systems. Anything that relies on electromagnetic signaling. Our weapons rely on electromagnetic targeting, Walsh said. Yes. Marcus kept his voice even. Which is part of why the Vel's weapons were so ineffective. All their systems are electromagnetic dependent. They couldn't target through the null fields. Diana looked at the footage of the null field in operation. Watched a Vel defensive ship lose all control systems and tumble, helpless, into a Kreth plasma blast. Are our targeting systems electromagnetic dependent? Our primary targeting systems are, yes. Marcus paused. But our backup targeting systems, the manual override systems that have been in the hull since the ironclad was built and that nobody ever uses because they're 40-year-old technology, those are mechanical and optical. Completely electromagnetic independent. Diana looked at him. They'd need to be operated by crew at manual gun stations, Marcus said. Which means people at physical weapon controls with no computer assistance, operating cannon systems that were designed in the early days of deep fleet construction. The accuracy is, he thought about how to say it. The accuracy is what it is. The accuracy, Leon Torres said from the back of the room, is whatever the people operating them make it. Diana looked at him. Then back at Marcus. How long to reactivate the manual systems and train crew on operation? With our current engineering team? Marcus thought. I can have them functional in 36 hours. Training is a separate question. These systems are intuitive in principle but require significant physical coordination and spatial judgment. I can have my Marines qualified in 24 hours, Leon said flatly. Marcus looked at Leon. Have you ever operated a manual cannon system? No. But I've operated every other weapon system on this ship, 3 different enemy weapon systems I picked up in the field, and a Vel plasma rifle that Coordinator Saya showed me this morning. He paused. I'll figure it out. Diana turned to Walsh. What else? Hull armor, Walsh said. Their plasma weapons hit harder than anything we've been designed to withstand. Our current armor configuration will hold for maybe 4 or 5 direct hits before we start losing structural integrity in the affected sections. And if we redistribute the reactive plating from the secondary hull sections to double layer the primary battle surfaces? Walsh looked at the engineering schematic. We lose protection on decks 13 through 20. But we double the survivability of the core hull. He paused. It means if they hit the secondary hull, it's catastrophic for those sections. Then those sections get evacuated and sealed. Diana looked around the room. I want every non-essential crew member and all Vel refugees in the most protected interior sections of the ship. Medical bay, cargo holds, the inner engineering spaces. She paused. And I want them inside the ironclad, not on the Vel ship. If fighting starts, the Remembrance of Dawn is a target. The Vel may not want to leave their ship, Saya said. Everyone turned. Saya was standing in the doorway, Yolanda at her shoulder. She had clearly been there for some time. Apologies, Saya said. I should have announced myself. She stepped into the room. But I have information that may be useful. She walked to the display showing the null field. Looked at it for a moment. The null field has a maximum range of 400 kilometers. Beyond that range it cannot function. The field dissipates. Marcus went very still. How do you know that? Because we built that technology, Saya said simply. The Kreth did not invent the null field. They stole it. From us. Something moved through her voice. Old grief, old anger, packed down tight. They have been using our own weapon against us for 6 months. But they do not fully understand it. They have never pushed it to maximum output because they do not know that at maximum output, it reaches its own structural limit and collapses. She paused. If you can draw their ships to within 400 kilometers and simultaneously damage the field generators, which are located here, she pointed to the Kreth ship schematic that Marcus had assembled from the combat footage. Here and here, the field collapses and all their subsequent shots are electromagnetic dependent. Which means your targeting systems can compensate. The room was very quiet. You know where their field generators are, Diana said. I designed the technology, Saya said. In another life. She looked at Diana steadily. I am a Vel coordinator, Captain. In Vel society that is an administrative role. We coordinate, we organize, we facilitate. We do not fight. She paused. But before I was a coordinator I was an engineer. The null field was my graduate thesis. The dark, complex expression crossed her face again. I have had considerable motivation over the past 6 months to think carefully about its weaknesses. Diana looked at her for a long moment. Saya, she said. How would you like to help us plan a battle? Saya met her eyes. And something shifted in the enormous amber gaze. Something resolving, something that had been wound tight for a very long time beginning to find a direction. HFY, she said. In her own language, the words that meant, from now on, I am with you. The next 48 hours were the hardest and most purposeful Diana had ever spent. The Ironclad's engineering teams worked in 12-hour rotations around the clock. The armor redistribution was completed in 18 hours, faster than Walsh had projected, because Chief Engineer Rosa Mendez had a particular talent for finding efficiency in crisis that made normal project timelines irrelevant. Rosa was 51, small and fierce, with oil-stained hands that were permanently a shade darker than the rest of her skin and a mind that worked in three-dimensional mechanical space as naturally as most people worked in conversation. She had served on 7 ships. She had never served under a captain she respected more than Diana Reeves, and she expressed that respect by making every single thing Diana needed happen faster than Diana expected. The manual cannon systems came online in 28 hours. Leon had his Marines at the gun stations in 32 running dry-fire exercises that he designed himself, drawing on everything from his long career in kinetic weapon systems and finding the thread of principle that connected a manual cannon to everything he already knew. It was not exact. It would never be exact. But by hour 40, his best gunners were threading virtual targets with a consistency that made Marcus Webb update his tactical assessment by nearly 15%. Meanwhile, Saya worked. She and Marcus Webb had established an improbable partnership. They were, Diana noted, very similar in the ways that counted for this particular purpose. Both meticulous, both accustomed to holding large amounts of complex information in an organized structure, both capable of working in near total silence for hours at a stretch. They had developed a working language that was half English, half the technical VEL vocabulary that Saya used for engineering concepts, mediated by the translation software that Yolanda had been refining continuously since the VEL came aboard. The tactical plan they produced together was, in Diana's assessment, excellent. It was also very risky. But the best plans in tight situations always were. On the VEL ship, Remembrance of Dawn, a different kind of work was happening. When Diana had asked the VEL to transfer to the Ironclad's interior for safety during the coming battle, there had indeed been resistance. But it had not come from the source she expected. The older VEL, the injured, the very young, these were brought aboard the Ironclad without significant difficulty. The resistance came from a group of 30 VEL in their apparent late adolescence to early adulthood, who had approached VEL coordinator Saya with a request. They wanted to fight. Saya had sat with them for 2 hours. Diana, watching through a security feed with Yolanda translating, heard something she had not expected. Heard Saya tell them the truth. Not a cleaned-up truth, not a careful diplomatic version. The full truth, that the Kreth were coming, that the humans were going to face them, that the VEL could not defend themselves with their current weapon systems against Kreth null fields, but that there were things they could do that humans could not. There are navigation systems on this ship that I can still operate manually, a young VEL named Caro said, his voice carrying, even in translation, the specific quality of a person who has moved past fear into something cleaner. I can fly the Remembrance of Dawn. I know this ship. I can maneuver in ways that a human crew operating an unfamiliar system cannot. You are not a soldier, Saya told him. No, Caro agreed. But you told me once that the difference between those who survive and those who do not is not training. It is decision. He looked at her steadily. I have decided. Saya had been quiet for a long time. Then she had gone to Diana. The young ones want to fly their own ship, she said. They want to participate. Diana had looked at Saya for a moment. Then she had said, can they do it without getting themselves killed? Probably not, Saya said honestly. But they will do it whether I authorize it or not. And if I authorize it, I can plan for them, give them a specific role that uses their capabilities and minimizes their exposure. Diana had thought about this for exactly the amount of time it took her to recognize that Saya was right. What role? And that was how the Remembrance of Dawn became part of the plan. Sandra Obi prepared the medical bay for mass casualties with the systematic thoroughness that was her primary professional mode. She had 3 times the beds she would normally deploy, medication reserves drawn down from deep storage, every surgical unit online and calibrated, her entire medical team briefed and assigned and as prepared as preparation could make them. She also, in the hours between her medical preparations, spent time in the VEL recovery space. The young VEL with the neural disruption, the child Saya had touched so gently that first night, had not improved. The disruption was spreading. Sandra had no treatment for it in her medical databases. She had never encountered this injury before. She was working essentially without a map. She sat beside the child and worked. She tried things that didn't work and tried different things. She consulted every xenobiology resource she had access to. She called in favors from colleagues at 3 different research institutions via long-range communication. She did not sleep for 31 hours. And then at 0300 on the second day, the child opened her eyes. "Caro," she said. One word in Vel. "Looking for someone." Sandra did not know what the word meant yet. She found out 2 hours later when Yolanda explained. It was a Vel term of endearment. Roughly equivalent to "my heart." The kind of word used for someone you love. Sandra sat with that for a moment. Then she went back to work. But she kept thinking about it. Caro. The word a small child used in the first moment she could speak. She kept thinking about the way love expressed itself, even in languages you didn't speak. Even in bodies built entirely differently from your own. The same impulse, the same word-shaped feeling, reaching for someone it loved across the dark. Leon Torres found Diana at the observation deck at midnight, the night before the Kreth were expected. She was standing at the large viewport looking out at the stars, and she was holding a cup of coffee that had clearly gone cold, and she was doing the thing she did when she thought no one was watching. The thing where the command face dropped slightly and you could see the actual weight of what she carried. "Captain," he said. She turned and the command face came back, but not completely, because it was Leon and they had known each other for 9 years. "Sergeant Major," she said. "Shouldn't you be resting? Shouldn't you?" She turned back to the viewport. "Sit down, Leon." He sat. She remained standing looking out at the dark. 412 people, she said. Plus 2,200 crew. She was quiet for a moment. That's a lot of people depending on a plan built in 48 hours against a civilization we knew nothing about a week ago. "Yes," Leon said. Simply, without qualification because that was what the moment needed. "Do you think it'll work?" Leon considered the question seriously because she was asking it seriously and she deserved a serious answer. "I think the plan is as good as it can be with what we have. I think our people are ready. I think Saya is the smartest person I've met in 30 years of military service and she's on our side." He paused. "I think you've made the right decisions. Every one." Diana looked at the stars. "Leon. Those children in cargo hold B." He did not move. "I know about them," she said. "I've known since the second night." He looked at her. "I didn't report it either," she said. And something crossed her face that might have been the ghost of a smile. "Are they still there?" "No. I had them move to the intersection with the other Vel children 3 hours ago. When I told them where they were going, the middle one tried to bring me with her." Pause. "I don't know how she communicated that. She managed it anyway." Diana was quiet for a moment. "What are their names?" "I don't know. I've been calling them 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the brave one. 2 is the quiet one. 3 snores." Diana made a sound that was definitely a laugh, quietly made and quickly controlled but genuine. Then she was quiet again. "We're going to bring them through this," she said. It was not a question and it was not bravado. It was something else, a statement of intent with the full weight of her will behind it. "Yes," Leon said again. "We are." They came out of warp at 0612 41 minutes earlier than predicted. Marcus had anticipated this, had built a 30-minute early arrival margin into the plan, which meant they were 11 minutes inside the contingency. The ironclad was at battle stations before the Kreth ships had fully resolved from warp distortion. Diana was on the bridge in full command gear, her command face on and fully deployed, watching the sensor display with the still, focused attention of a person who has found, in the arrival of the thing they feared, something close to relief. At least the waiting was over. The Kreth fleet was 7 ships. Diana had expected 4, based on Saya's intelligence about standard Kreth pursuit formations. 7 was worse than expected. 7, Walsh said quietly beside her. "I can count," Diana said. The Kreth ships were. She studied them on the visual display, pulling up the high-resolution sensor imaging, triangular in profile, flat and wide, dark in color, surfaces that seemed to absorb sensor imaging in a way that made them slightly harder to read than they should have been. They were clearly powerful. They moved through space with a particular confidence of things that had never, in living memory, been successfully opposed. "Are they scanning us?" she asked. "Actively," Marcus confirmed from the intelligence station. "They've identified the ironclad as non-Vel." Pause. "I'm receiving a transmission. Put it through." The Kreth communication was nothing like Vel communication. Where the Vel voice was layered and harmonic, the Kreth voice was flat and sharp, single tone, percussive at the consonants, with a rhythm that felt less like language and more like impact. The translation software took 40 seconds to process it. "They say," Yolanda paused, reading the translation. Her face went carefully neutral in the way of a professional processing something that personally unsettles her. They say, you are holding what belongs to us. Return the Vel and their ship and depart from this space. We do not want conflict with undocumented civilizations. Undocumented. They had not encountered humans before. They had not cataloged humanity in their assessment of civilizations worth taking seriously. Diana filed this away. Respond, she said. Tell them, the individuals aboard this ship are under the protection of the United Earth Fleet. They have been granted asylum under Earth's protection. We do not recognize any claim of ownership over sapient beings. We will not be releasing them. Yolanda transmitted. 43 seconds of waiting. Then the Kreth response translated. You do not understand what you are. You do not understand what we are. Stand aside. No, Diana said. One word. Have Yolanda transmitted exactly like that? Yolanda looked at her. Then at the screen. Then she transmitted it. 7 seconds later the first Kreth ship fired. The null field hit the ironclad like a wave. Every electromagnetic system on the ship stuttered. The lights flickered. Targeting systems went to their 3-second emergency reroute cycle. Communications dropped and re-established. Across the ship, every person felt it as a sudden gut-level wrongness, the kind of electromagnetic disruption that the human nervous system, which ran on bioelectric signals, could feel at a primal level as a wave of nausea and disorientation. Steady, Diana said into the ship-wide comm, just the one word. The voice she used when she needed every person on the ship to hear her certainty. The targeting systems came back on emergency backup. Limited, degraded, 60% effective. Not enough. Not yet. Distance to closest Kreth vessel? She asked. 6,200 kilometers, Walsh said. We need them inside 400. How long? At current approach speed. I know what I'm asking. How long? 22 minutes if we fall back at standard burn. They'll follow, they want the Val. Walsh paused. But 22 minutes is a long time to absorb fire with degraded shields and no effective targeting return. Apex array status? Standing by. Marcus. Ready, Marcus said from the weapons subsection he had personally taken over for this engagement. Capacitors charged. On your order. The Apex array was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a focused electromagnetic pulse projector, experimental, untested in combat, capable of delivering an enormously concentrated electromagnetic burst in a tight forward cone. Against any purely electromagnetic weapon system, it would be devastating. Against null fields it might do nothing. Or, and this was the part of the plan that Saya had proposed and Marcus had confirmed and Diana had accepted with the specific comm that came from having no better options, it might interact with the null field generators in a way that caused a cascade overload at the precise moment the field was operating at maximum output, which was the moment it would be at maximum output because they would be at 400 kilometers. All ships, Diana said on the fleet channel. Ironclad is going to fall back. Resolute, begin harassment pattern alpha. Lagos, maintain support position. Shenlong, she paused. Lu, you know what to do. Understood, Diana, came Lu Wei's voice, calm and precise with a Beijing accent that she had never lost despite 20 years in the fleet. We'll be ready. And the remembrance of dawn? Standing by, said a young voice. Carol. Steady and clear. Stay dark until my signal, Diana said. Not a moment before. Understood. The first Kreth plasma blast hit the ironclad at that moment, and the ship rang like a struck bell. The next 18 minutes were the hardest Diana had ever spent on a command bridge. The plasma hits were not killing shots. The Kreth were trying to disable, not destroy because they wanted the Vel alive. But each hit was enormous, stripping away the redistributed armor in sections, driving deep thermal damage into hull layers, overwhelming damage control teams and demanding constant attention from Rosa Mendez's engineering section. The manual cannon teams, operating on Leon's training and their own considerable nerve, were landing approximately 40% of their shots on Kreth hulls. Not enough to cause serious damage, but enough to make the Kreth ships maneuver, enough to disrupt their firing solutions, enough to buy time. 11 minutes, Walsh said. Distance 4,200 kilometers. They're increasing speed, Marcus noted. They're getting impatient. Diana watched the sensor display. Watched the geometry of the engagement, the ironclad falling back in a controlled withdrawal, the Resolute darting in from oblique angles to break up Kreth firing patterns, the Lagos holding steady and providing continuous repair drone support that was the only reason the ironclad's hull was still largely intact. 7 minutes, Walsh said. 2,800 kilometers. Somewhere on decks 13 through 20, 3 sections had lost pressure following a plasma hit on the secondary hull. Those sections had been evacuated and sealed. No casualties yet, a fact that Diana filed separately in the part of her mind that kept track of the people, that never lost track of the people. 4 minutes. 1,700 kilometers. A second null field deployment. Every system on the bridge stuttered again, harder this time. Diana held on to the edge of the command console with both hands, not from fear, but from the physical fact of the electromagnetic disturbance making her own nervous system rebel briefly. Apex array? Still charged, Marcus said, his voice steady through the disruption. Waiting for your mark. 2 minutes. 800 kilometers. 700. 6. Diana watched the distance counter. Watched it with the absolute, undivided attention that she gave to things that mattered beyond the point of distraction. 4:50, Walsh said. 4:30. 4:10. All manual stations. Leon's voice on the internal channel, calm, almost conversational. Target the field generators. You have the coordinates. You've been looking at them for 48 hours. Hit them. 405, Walsh said. 4:03. Marcus, Diana said. Apex. Now. The array fired. The effect was not what Diana expected. She had expected a clean interaction. Field hits array hits field, cascade occurs. What happened was bigger. The apex burst hit the null field at the precise moment that the field was attempting to extend to full range, and the interaction was not a cascade but an explosion. A burst of electromagnetic energy that lit up the sensor display like a sunrise, that physically pushed every Kreth ship in the engagement back by several hundred meters, that dropped every null field in the Kreth fleet simultaneously and left them completely offline. There was approximately 2 seconds of absolute silence on the bridge. Then Diana said, "All weapons. Full engagement. Now." And the ironclad opened up. 24 particle cannon batteries at full power with full electromagnetic targeting restored. 12 torpedo bays firing spread patterns across the Kreth formation. The Resolute coming in from flank at attack speed, weapons blazing. The Shunlong Lu's science vessel, deploying the sensor array weapon modification that Sandra and Lu's weapons officer had constructed together, which was not lethal but which flooded the Kreth sensor systems with false targeting data that made their return fire wild. And from the dark, the remembrance of dawn. Caro brought the Vel ship out of its sensor shadow at maximum available thrust, directly at the Kreth formation's flank. He was not firing weapons. The Vel had none effective against the Kreth. What he was doing was using the remembrance of dawn as a blade, inserting it into the gap between two Kreth ships at a speed and angle that forced them to maneuver hard to avoid collision, breaking their formation, separating them from mutual support, handing the ironclad's targeting systems perfect isolated shots on individual vessels. Later, Diana would watch the combat recording of that maneuver 17 times. Every time, she would feel the same thing. A shiver of something between admiration and awe at a young person who had never trained for this, had no tactical background, had simply understood the geometry of the moment and flown directly into it. Caro. HFY MJHY. From now on with you. The engagement lasted 14 more minutes. When it was over, 3 Kreth ships were destroyed. 2 were severely damaged and had retreated to a distance of 10,000 kilometers. 2 were intact and holding position. The ironclad was damaged but functional. The Resolute had taken a plasma hit to its drive section and was running on reduced thrust. The Lagos was intact. The Shunlong had a hull breach on its port side that had been sealed by automatic systems. No human crew fatalities. No Vel fatalities. Diana let herself exhale. "Hail the Kreth," she said. The Kreth commander's face on the screen was not what Diana had expected. She had built a mental image of the Kreth over the past 72 hours from Saya's descriptions and from the combat footage. Predatory, coldly efficient, confident to the edge of contempt. She had expected something that matched the weight of what they had done to 4 civilizations and were doing to a 5th. What she saw instead was something that complicated the picture significantly. The Kreth were roughly humanoid, bipedal, upright, with 4 limbs and a bilateral symmetry that suggested convergent evolution with humans and Vel. Their skin was pale blue-gray, almost luminescent. Their eyes were deeply set and dark, with a reflective quality that caught light. Their faces were angular and sharp-featured, and the one facing Diana across the communication link was carrying something in its expression that the translation software's emotional analysis function read as confusion, reassessment, unresolved threat response. Not what she'd expected. "I am Captain Diana Reeves of the United Earth ship Ironclad," she said. "I would like to speak with you." The Kreth commander was silent for several seconds. Then, "You are a new civilization." "We are," Diana said. "We've been in space for about 200 years. We haven't met the Kreth before. You should not have been able to do what you just did." It was said flatly, not angrily, as a statement of fact that conflicted with a model of reality that the Kreth commander was clearly struggling to update. Our null fields have never failed. No civilization in this sector has technology capable of. We didn't use our technology, Diana said. We used Vel technology. She paused. The people you've been hunting created the null field. Did you know that? Pause. The Vel are non-combatants. The Vel are engineers. Scientists. Some of the most technically capable people I've met. Diana kept her voice even. Conversational. Not triumphant. And they came to us because we're the only civilization in this sector that answered their distress call. Silence from the Kreth commander. I want to understand something, Diana said. You have destroyed 4 civilizations. You have attacked the Vel. What? What is it that you actually need that requires destruction on that scale? The Kreth commander looked at her for a long moment. You are asking us to justify ourselves, it said. I'm asking you to explain yourselves. There's a difference. Another silence. Then, resources. Biological components, certain organic compounds that our biology requires and that occur in abundance in specific types of planetary life. Technology. Territory. Pause. These things are limited. The civilizations that have them do not give them willingly. Have you asked? The Kreth commander looked at her with an expression that the translation software flagged as bewilderment edging toward offense. Asked, it repeated. Yes. Made contact. Explain what you need. Tried to trade, negotiate, establish mutual benefit. Diana held its gaze. Have you tried that? The silence this time was very long. The Kreth do not. It stopped. Started again. It is not our way. I know it's not, Diana said. But here we are. 3 of your ships destroyed. 2 damaged. Your primary tactical advantage failed. She was quiet for a moment. I don't want to destroy your remaining ships. I want to talk. She paused. Is that an option? The Kreth commander looked at her. Something moved in its dark, reflective eyes that the translation software could not categorize. Something outside its parameters, something that might have been, at its core, the same thing that lived in Saya's amber eyes when she had said from now on, I am with you. The possibility of a door. It has never been an option before, the Kreth commander said slowly. It is now, Diana said. If you choose it. The negotiations took 11 hours. Diana did not conduct them alone. Saya was at her side for every hour of them, translating nuance and technical detail that went beyond what the software could manage. Marcus Webb was a constant presence, tracking the strategic landscape of every exchange, passing notes on a datapad that told Diana when to push, when to hold, when to offer. And Leon Torres stood at the back of the room the entire time. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence was the reminder of the other option. The option that the Kreth understood and that Leon embodied with the calm, total authority of someone who has mastered violence precisely so that it does not need to be used. What emerged from 11 hours was not a peace treaty. It was not a sudden transformation of the Kreth from what they were into something better. It was something more modest and more real, an agreement to pause. An agreement to a monitored ceasefire with penalties for violation. An agreement to a formal meeting in 3 months, with Kreth leadership and human representatives and surviving Vel representatives, to discuss what could be built instead of what had been destroyed. It was not enough. Diana knew it was not enough. But it was a beginning. And beginnings were where everything started. The day after the battle, the ironclad was in the particular state that ships enter after combat. Not the emergency intensity of the fight itself, but the sustained, serious work of counting what had been lost and repairing what could be repaired and tending to what had been broken. Rosa Mendez's engineering teams were everywhere, in the damaged sections, in the corridors, in the spaces between hull layers where the plasma damage had reached. The medical teams were treating burns and impact injuries and the psychological responses that always followed combat, the particular internal damage that had no clean wound to close. Crew members moved through the ship with the focused, slightly hollowed quality of people who have been through something and are now on the other side of it and figuring out who they are in that new landscape. Diana walked her ship. She did this after every hard action. Walked it from stem to stern, not to inspect but to be present. To see the people. To be seen by them. It was the most important command tool she had, more important than any tactical system or strategic plan. The simple act of being physically present in the spaces where her crew lived and worked, looking them in the eye, acknowledging that they were real and that what they had done was real. She found Yolanda Park in the communications center, running maintenance diagnostics on the translation software with the careful attention of someone who is using precision work to process something large. How are you? Diana asked. Yolanda looked up. Honestly, still a little shaky. But better. She paused. Captain, the Kreth commander. At the end of the 11 hours. Did you believe them? That they'd honor the ceasefire? Diana thought about it honestly. I believe they'll honor it long enough to assess us properly, she said. We were a complete surprise to them. They need time to recalibrate. The ceasefire buys us that time too. She paused. What they do with it after that, that's up to them. Yolanda nodded. And the Vel? The Vel. Diana looked out the viewport. Are in a very different position than they were 3 days ago. She was quiet for a moment. They came here with nothing. They're leaving with an ally, a ceasefire, and something else. What? The knowledge that they're not alone out here, Diana said. That there are people who will answer the door. Yolanda was quiet for a moment. Then, Coordinator Saya is asking for you. She says it's not urgent, whenever you have time. Tell her now. Saya was in the Vel recovery space, sitting beside the child who had woken 2 nights before, who had improved steadily since Sandra's treatment, who was now sitting up and eating something from a container that Saya held for her. The child looked up at Diana with enormous amber eyes that were bright and clear and unafraid. She is better, Saya said. Something in her voice that Diana was now fluent enough in to read. Relief so profound it had been folded many times and was now something quieter and deeper than its original form. Dr. Obi is remarkable, Diana said. Yes. Saya looked at the child. Her name is Leva. She is 8 years old. She was studying to be a botanist. She paused. She wants me to tell you thank you. She has been practicing the words. Diana looked at the child. Leva looked back at her. And with the careful deliberateness of someone who has rehearsed a thing, she said in English, "Thank you. For my life." Diana crouched down to the child's level. Looked at her directly. "You're welcome," she said. "Leva." The child's eyes widened slightly at hearing her own name in a human voice. Then she made a sound, a soft, layered harmonic that the translation software after a moment rendered as laughter. Diana smiled. Leon found the 3 children, 1, 2, and 3 in his private taxonomy, in the intersection where they had been settled. They had, in the 2 days since he had moved them there, established a small territory around a set of storage containers that they had rearranged with creative efficiency into what appeared to be a home. They had also, and he was fairly certain this was one's initiative, persuaded the crew members in that section to bring them drawing materials, and the wall beside their territory was covered in drawings. Vel landscapes, he thought. Planets they were trying to hold on to. Things they were trying to remember. And in the corner, drawn carefully in multiple attempts, getting better each time, a figure. A large figure sitting cross-legged on a floor, surrounded by 3 smaller figures. One of the smaller figures appeared to be asleep against the large figure's knee. Leon looked at this for a long time. Then one appeared at his elbow, looking up at him with those amber eyes that still startled him slightly with how much expression they carried, and she pointed at the drawing and then pointed at him, and then made a sound, soft, questioning, hopeful, that needed no translation at all. "Yeah," Leon said. His voice was a little rougher than usual. "That's me." She made another sound, definitive, satisfied, and patted his arm once with her 4-fingered hand, and went back to her territory. Leon stood there for a while longer. Patrick Walsh found Diana at 2100 in the officer's mess, eating something and reading a report, and he put a cup of coffee on the table in front of her, hot this time, and sat down across from her. "Deep Fleet Command has been in contact," he said. "I know. I've been avoiding them. Diana." He used her name again. "You need to talk to them." "I know." She set down the report. Picked up the coffee. "What does Okafor want?" "A full debriefing, obviously. An official record of the first contact events." He paused. "He's also been in contact with the Earth Council. There are people there who want to make this very big very quickly. First alien contact. The Vel Alliance. The ceasefire with the Kreth. You're going to come home to a very changed situation." Diana looked at the coffee. "The Vel need protection and resources. A permanent safe haven while their home world situation is assessed. Medical support for the wounded. Educational integration for the children." She looked at Walsh. "None of that happens in a meeting room. All of it requires someone who actually knows these people." Walsh looked at her steadily. "You're going to push for a formal Vel protectorate. I'm going to push for the right thing, which is what I always push for. And the Kreth negotiation? The Kreth negotiation needs to happen at a higher level than I can provide. But it also needs someone in the room who knows what a null field is and why it matters that the Vel invented it, and what it means about the Kreth that they've been using technology they don't fully understand for 6 months." She paused. "Saya should be at that table." Walsh looked at her. "A Vel coordinator at the human diplomatic table." "She earned her seat," Diana said simply. Walsh was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When you answered that distress call, Before you knew what was on that ship, were you thinking about any of this? Diana looked at him. No, she said. I was thinking about 4 words. Please. We are dying. She paused. The rest of it is just, what happens when you open the door? Walsh picked up his own coffee. Held it for a moment. Caro, he said. Was the Vel word. He was using it as something else. Using it as a word for the thing he didn't have English for. The thing that explained why 2,200 people had gone into a fight with 7 ships for 400 strangers. The thing that was, when you reduced it all the way down, the actual point. Diana looked at him. And for just a moment, the command face was entirely gone, and what was there instead was simply a person. Tired and grateful and carrying enormous things and aware of how important those things were. Caro, she agreed. Fleet Admiral James Okafor arrived at the Ironclad's position 12 days after the battle, aboard his flagship, the UES Covenant. He was 64 years old, tall and grave, with the particular quality of a person who had spent 40 years making large decisions and living with the full weight of what large decisions cost. He came aboard without the formal ceremony that protocol suggested. No dress uniforms, no assembled honor guard. He sent ahead a single message. Informal meeting, Captain's briefing room, 0900. Bring whoever you need. Diana brought Walsh, Marcus, Saya, and Yolanda. When she walked into the briefing room and found Okafor already there, standing at the viewport, he turned and looked at her for a long moment. Captain Reeves, he said. Admiral. He looked at Saya. Vel Coordinator. Saya inclined her head in the Vel gesture of formal respect. Admiral Okafor. He looked at her for a moment. You designed the null field. I did. And you gave us its weakness. I did. Why? He asked it simply, directly. Not challenging, genuinely asking. Saya was quiet for a moment. Because you answered, she said. Because when everything else was gone and the only remaining option was to find someone who would open the door, you opened it. She paused. Trust and information travel the same road, Admiral. You gave me one. I gave you the other. Okafor looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at Diana. Your report was thorough. I tried. It was also, in several places, politically significant. He walked to the table and sat down. They all sat. The Earth Council has been in session since I forwarded it. There are members who want to proceed with maximum caution, establish the Vel as temporary refugees under limited humanitarian provisions while formal diplomatic processes are initiated, and handle the Kreth situation through standard treaty development channels. And the other members? Diana asked. Want to do what you did. He looked at her. Move fast. Commit hard. Take the position that humanity's signal means what it says. He paused. The argument against is obvious. We are committing to the defense of an alien civilization against a threat we barely survived. The Kreth ceasefire may not hold. We are extending ourselves into a galactic conflict that we don't fully understand. And the argument for? Walsh asked. Is obvious too, Okafor said. He looked at his hands for a moment, then back up. If humanity's signal says if you are lost, come here, and we then do not mean it when it actually costs us something. He paused. We become liars. And the galaxy learns, quickly and comprehensively, that we cannot be trusted. He looked at Diana. Is that what you want, Captain? No, Diana said. What I want is for 412 people who had nowhere else to go to have somewhere to go. And for the 5 civilizations the Kreth have destroyed or damaged to be the last 5. She paused. That's what I want. It's not a small thing. No. But small things didn't bring us here. She, Diana indicated Saya, flew a dying ship to the edge of her endurance across a sector of space because the only signal that read like an open door was ours. That's not a small thing. The answer to that should not be a small thing. Okafor looked at Saya. Saya looked back at him with the amber eyes that had, over the past 2 weeks, deepened in Diana's experience from the eyes of a stranger to the eyes of someone she was beginning to understand. Coordinator Saya, Okafor said. If humanity formally extends protectorate status to the Vel, and if the Vel agree to participate as full partners in the diplomatic process with the Kreth, what does that mean for your people? Saya was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was very controlled, very steady. It means my people survive, she said. It means Leva lives to be the botanist she is meant to be. It means Caro. She stopped, composed herself. It means the young ones who flew their ship into a battle they had no business surviving have a future to fly toward. She paused. It means we are not alone. Okafor looked at her for a long time. Then he turned to Diana. I'm recommending the full protectorate to the council, he said. And I'm recommending you as the permanent liaison officer for the Vel-human relationship. He paused. Which means you're going to be doing a great deal of diplomatic work that you are almost certainly going to find tedious. Diana looked at him. Then at Saya. Then back at Okafor. I'll manage, she said. Outside the briefing room in the corridor, Yolanda walked beside Saya back toward the Vel recovery section. How do you feel? Yolanda asked. Saya was quiet for a moment. Strange, she said. Good. Strange in a good way. She paused. Yolanda. The word Caro, do you know it? I know it's a Vel word. A term of endearment. It is more specific than that, Saya said. It means, she thought. It means, the one my heart recognizes. The person or the place that your deepest self knows as home. She paused. It is not exclusively a word for love. We use it for places. For ideas. For... She was quiet for a moment. I think I understand now why your captain said it to Commander Walsh after the battle. I heard it through the briefing room wall. Yolanda looked at her. She was saying, Saya searched for the English. She was saying, this is what it is all for. This is the thing worth defending. Not the ships. Not the strategy. The people. The idea that people matter. She looked at Yolanda. That is what Caro means when it is used that way. Yolanda was quiet for a while as they walked. That's what humanity's signal says, she said finally. Isn't it? That's the open door. Yes, Saya said. Yolanda thought about it for the rest of the walk back. About distress signals and open doors and what it meant to build a civilization around the idea that strangers were worth saving. About the fact that the universe was large and dark and full of things that harvested, and also full of things that opened doors, and that the difference between those two kinds of things was a choice. A choice made every single time. 6 weeks after the battle, the ironclad set course for Earth. It was a long journey, 8 weeks at standard warp, and it was, in its way, a transformation. The ship that had left Deep Space Patrol territory 2 months ago was not the ship going home. Something had happened aboard it that could not be undone, that had changed the fabric of what the ironclad was. Diana stood the watch from 0600 to 1200 every day as she always had. Walsh brought her daily reports. Marcus ran intelligence assessments of Kreth signal patterns that were, so far, consistent with the ceasefire. Rosa Mendez's teams continued to repair the battle damage, and the ship healed slowly the way things heal. Imperfectly with scars but toward wholeness. The Vel were aboard. All 412 of them. The Remembrance of Dawn was under tow, too damaged to travel independently but salvageable, which mattered to the Vel in ways that went beyond the practical. It was their home. It was the last piece of the world they had left. Diana had given orders that the Vel were to be treated as crew. Not as passengers, not as refugees in any limited or conditional sense, but as people who were part of the ironclad for the duration of the journey and who were to be included in the life of the ship. This had been received by her crew with a kind of wholehearted adoption that told her she had been right about the people she commanded, that they did not need to be ordered to see strangers as people, that they would do it on their own given the permission to. The result was something unexpected and wonderful. Vel and human crew mingled on the training deck, where the physical difference between the species created genuine mutual fascination. The Vel were lighter than humans, lower bone density, lower muscle mass, but faster in their reflexes and more flexible, with a spatial awareness that was almost preternatural. They looked at human physical capacity with the same wonder that the humans looked at Vel flexibility and speed. Cross-species training sessions developed organically, based on a kind of comparative curiosity that was more joyful than competitive. In the mess hall, the combination of Vel and human food preferences had driven the kitchen team to creative extremes. The Vel diet was primarily plant-based and highly varied, with specific mineral requirements that the kitchen team had cross-referenced with Earth botany and found surprising synergies with. Joint meals happened naturally, humans and Vel eating together, trying each other's food with the careful, concentrated attention of people discovering something new about the universe. The children were, as children usually are, ahead of the adults. 1, 2, and 3, who had acquired, through extensive gesture-based negotiation with Leon Torres over multiple evenings, the names Rin, Miso, and Bello in English approximations of their Vel names, had established themselves as semi-permanent fixtures in Leon's daily routine. They appeared at 0700 with the precision of a military schedule, participated in whatever Leon was doing with varying degrees of comprehension and uniform enthusiasm, and disappeared to their own activities at approximately 1500 before reappearing at dinner. Rin, it emerged, had a specific and intense interest in the manual cannon systems that Leon had trained his Marines on. She spent several afternoons studying the non-operational training simulation with the focused absorption of a child discovering a vocation. Leon observed this with a feeling he didn't have a precise word for. Something warm and slightly frightened, the way you felt watching a young person discover what they were for. In the middle of the 6th week, Saya found Diana at the observation deck at midnight. Your turn, Diana said without turning. She had been waiting for this, in some sense, since that night 7 weeks ago when Leon had found her here. Saya sat down beside her, not standing at the viewport as Diana had been, but sitting, which was the Vel rest posture. She was quiet for a long time, looking at the stars passing in warp light, the stretched and beautiful light of transit. I have been thinking, Saya said finally, about what happens when we arrive. What about it? Earth is, she paused. In our databases, which are very limited, the information we have about humanity describes a civilization that is young and dynamic and occasionally chaotic. A civilization that argues with itself constantly about what it is and what it should do. She paused. Our arrival will change your world. Yes, Diana said. It will. Is that? Another pause. Diana was coming to recognize these pauses as the spaces in which Saya translated thought between languages, not linguistically but conceptually, between the Vel way of approaching things and the English way of naming them. Is that something your people want? Diana thought about it honestly. Some do. Some don't. Some aren't sure. She looked at the stretched stars. That's how humans are. We're not a single voice. She thought about how to say it. We're a conversation. Loud and complicated and often going in multiple directions at once. But when the conversation matters, when there's something real at stake, we find our way to the same answer. How do you know this? Because we've been doing it for a very long time. She paused. And because the signal we put out, the one you heard, the one that reads like an open door, that wasn't an accident. Someone decided to put that in the signal. Many people decided. It was argued about and revised and argued about again, and in the end the message is what it is. She looked at Saya. People chose it. People who had been through hard things and who had seen what the other options looked like and who chose this one instead. She was quiet for a moment. That's who you're going to meet on Earth. The people who made that choice and who have been making it, every day for longer than you and I have been alive. Saya was quiet. The stars moved past. Caro, she said softly. Yeah, Diana said. Caro. 3 days before arrival, Walsh found Diana in the captain's ready room at 0300, which was where she did the thinking that needed to happen without anyone watching. You can't sleep either, he said. Making notes. She showed him the pad. Pages of it, preparation for the Earth arrival, talking points, practical needs for the Vel, briefing outlines for the Council, strategy notes for the Kreth negotiation framework. Someone needs to be ready for what happens when we dock. Walsh sat down. Diana. You've been awake for 22 hours. I'm aware. What are you actually worried about? She set the pad down. Looked at him honestly. I'm worried that we'll get home and the conversation will become political before it becomes human. That the Council will see 400 Vel as a diplomatic variable rather than 400 people. That the Kreth ceasefire will become a bureaucratic process that takes 5 years and produces nothing. She paused. That Saya will walk into a room full of politicians and be managed rather than heard. Walsh looked at her for a moment. You're going to fight for all of it, he said. It was not a question. Every single piece of it. I know. He stood. Sleep for 4 hours, Diana. Whatever is on that pad will still be there. The Vel will still be on board. The problems will still need solving. He paused. You can't carry it when you're running on nothing. She looked at him. Then at the pad. Then she set it down, face down on the desk. 4 hours, she said. 4 hours. She slept for 5. She didn't tell Walsh. The ironclad dropped out of warp in Earth's solar system at 0942 on a Tuesday, and for 43 minutes, Diana stood at the bridge viewport and watched her home become visible. She had been away for 11 months. Space did something interesting to the experience of seeing Earth after a long absence. It didn't dim it. Every time, it hit with the same force as the first time, maybe harder because you had been in the absolute dark and cold for a long time, and here was the blue-white impossibility of a living world, wrapped in atmosphere, glowing against the black. There it is, Walsh said quietly beside her. There it is, she agreed. She turned. Saya was standing at the secondary viewport, and Diana watched the Vel coordinator see Earth for the first time. Watched the amber eyes go very wide. Watched the particular stillness that came over Saya's face. The stillness of a person in the presence of something that reorganizes their understanding of what is possible. It is. Saya began. I know, Diana said. How do you ever leave? Diana was quiet for a moment. Because out there, she gestured at the dark beyond Earth, is where the people who need the door are. The docking at Fleet Station Orbital was accompanied by every formal element that Diana had been bracing for. Representatives from the Earth Council were aboard the station. Media drones were present in force. The news had broken 14 days ago when a preliminary report reached Earth, and the public response had been enormous, chaotic, and characteristically human in its simultaneous enthusiasm and anxiety and fierce argument. Okafor was already there, having traveled ahead, and he met Diana in the docking terminal with the briefest possible version of the necessary conversation. "Briefing in 2 hours," he said. "Council chamber. Bring Saya." "I know. Diana." He stopped her. "It went well on the council. The protectorate is approved in principle. The full terms are being finalized, but the fundamental commitment is there." He paused. "You should know that." Diana looked at him. Let it land. Let herself feel the full weight of what that meant, not for herself but for the 412 people now disembarking through the docking arm behind her. "Thank you, Admiral," she said. "Don't thank me. I'm just carrying what you built." He paused. "Now go." 2 hours. The briefing was long and detailed and exactly what Diana had expected. She had prepared for it. She performed it. But what she held in her mind throughout, the thing that made the tedious political process bearable, that made the careful diplomatic language and the arguments over terms and the procedural questions feel worth enduring, was what had happened at the docking terminal 40 minutes before the briefing, before the representatives and the media drones and the weight of history. She had been walking Saya through the terminal. Saya had been looking at everything, the crowds of humans, the architecture, the screens showing Earth's surface, the sheer scale of human civilization compacted into this one station at the edge of home. And a child had run up. Not a Vel child. A human child, a girl maybe 7 years old, with her mother calling after her from 10 meters back. She had escaped, clearly the way children escape, with purpose and zero strategy. She ran up to Saya and stopped. Saya had looked down at her. The enormous amber eyes meeting small brown ones. The girl had looked at Saya for approximately 1 second. Then she had said with complete child directness, "Your eyes are pretty." Saya had been very still for a moment. Then she had crouched down, the way Diana had crouched down to Leva's level, and looked at the child directly and said, "So are yours." The girl had beamed. Her mother had arrived, apologetic and flushed. Saya had turned to her and said in simple, clear English, "She is wonderful. You have built something wonderful." The mother had looked at Saya for a moment. Then at Diana. Then back at Saya. And she had said, Are you one of them? The ones who came here?" "I am," Saya said. "My name is Saya. We came because your signal said to come." She paused. "We are very glad we did." Diana, watching this from 2 meters away, had felt something shift in her chest. A feeling she did not have precise language for, but which was close to the feeling of watching something impossibly important happen in the smallest possible frame. A woman and a Vel on a station floor. A child with pretty eyes. First contact, really, not the formal version, not the version in the history books. The real version. The one where 2 kinds of people looked at each other and saw person. That night, in borrowed quarters on Fleet Station Orbital, Diana wrote in her log for the first time since the battle. 6 weeks ago I answered a distress signal. I did not know what was on the other end of it. I knew only that someone was dying and asking for help, and I had the capacity to help. I have never believed that the capacity to help and the choice to help required more justification than that. What followed was extraordinary. But it was not strange. It was not outside the character of the people I serve with, the people I come from. 2,200 crew members went into a fight we had no guarantee of winning, for strangers, without hesitation, because the strangers had asked, and because that is who we are when we are being who we should be. Saya told me that humanity's exploration signal reads like an open door. I did not know that before she told me. I have been thinking about it for 6 weeks. I think it is the most important thing anyone has ever said to me. An open door means we see you. We are not afraid of you. We believe you might matter. We are willing to find out. That is the whole argument. That is the entire case. It is not complicated. It is only hard. Caro. HFY. She closed the log. She looked at the stars through the viewport. She slept. 3 months later, the formal summit convened. It was held not on Earth and not on a human ship, but at a neutral point in deep space. A specially constructed platform built jointly by human and Vel engineers in 8 weeks, that was in itself a statement. Neither side's territory. Ground made together. The Vel delegation was led by Saya. Behind her were 6 Vel council members, the surviving leadership of a civilization that had lost its home world, that was in the process of establishing temporary settlements on 3 planets within the human protectorate, that was, against every probability, beginning to rebuild. The human delegation was led by Fleet Admiral Okafor. Diana Reeves sat at his left hand, in her capacity as permanent liaison officer. Marcus Webb was 2 seats down. Yolanda Park was serving as chief translator. The Kreth delegation was 3 beings. Their commander, the one Diana had spoken to across the communication link, led it. They arrived last, and when the Kreth commander entered the room and saw Saya, something happened in its face that no translation software could fully capture. Something that was not, Diana thought, contempt. Something that was recognition, and the particular weight of what recognition costs when you have been wrong. The first 3 hours were technical. The null field. The biological compounds the Kreth required. The resource questions that had driven 4 civilizations to destruction. It turned out, as these things often turned out, Diana thought, when someone finally forced the conversation to happen, that the Kreth requirements were not, in fact, incompatible with the existence of the civilizations they had been destroying. The biological compounds they needed were extractable from specific planetary environments without destroying those environments. They had simply never developed a method for sustainable extraction because they had never needed one. It had always been easier to take than to build. The Vel, who were among the finest engineers in this sector of space, and who had very specific motivations to ensure the Kreth learned a different method, had spent the 3 months since the battle developing one. Saya presented it in the 5th hour of the summit. The Kreth commander looked at the proposal. Read it in full. Then looked at Saya. You built this, it said. For us. I built it, Saya said. For everyone. She paused. The choice of how to use it, whether to use it, is yours. The room was very quiet. Why? The Kreth commander asked. And it was not, Diana noted, the same question that had been asked about everything else. Not strategic, not tactical, not resource-based. It was simply why. The oldest question. The one that lived underneath all the others. Saya was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was very even, very steady, carrying within it all the weight of 8 months of running and loss and a child named Leva who wanted to be a botanist and a young man named Caro who had flown his ship into a battle for people he had never met. Because destruction is easy, she said. And because everything worth having in this universe, everything that actually lasts, was built. Not taken. Built. She looked at the Kreth commander. And because you asked me once why I gave the humans the weakness of the null field. It is the same answer. Trust travels the same road as information. You have to give it before you receive it. She paused. I am giving it. The question is what you choose to do with that. The Kreth commander was silent for a very long time. The summit produced, at the end of 2 days, a framework agreement that would take years of detailed work to implement fully. It was not a perfect document. It was not a guarantee of anything. The Kreth had centuries of a particular way of existing, and frameworks were not magic wands. There would be violations. There would be difficult moments. There would be times when the door seemed to close and people on all sides would have to work to open it again. Diana knew this. She had always known this. She had not expected a perfect ending because she was not a person who believed in perfect endings. She believed in better beginnings. And this was a better beginning. Afterward she found Caro. He had come to the summit as part of the Vel delegation. Young, serious, standing very straight in the Vel formal garments that he wore with the slightly self-conscious dignity of a person who is not entirely accustomed to ceremony. He was 19 years old, she had learned. He had piloted the Remembrance of Dawn at the age of 19, with no military training, on the basis of a decision. Caro, she said. He turned. He had learned English well over the 3 months, faster than most of the adult Vel, with the specific efficiency of a mind that learned by doing. Captain Reeves.